Start Over Strong, Life After a DUI, a podcast for people, not offenders. Brought to you by Smart Start, the nation's most trusted, judgment-free ignition interlock provider. Today we are having the cannabis conversation, the truth about marijuana and DUI laws. We have a very special guest today, very excited to introduce him momentarily. First, I'm going to share a little tidbit on my weekend. So those that are close to me know I am a chocolate chip cookie baker. I love to do it, love to bake, and every Sunday I make a fresh batch from scratch. Well, my 5-year-old daughter and my 3-year-old son essentially this weekend oceaned 11 me into what I would call the great chocolate chip cookie heist. And, I look over and my daughter is, seeming very, very quiet. I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, I'm just getting a napkin. I said, okay. And then I see my son and, he's a walking red flag. And I look over, he turns towards me. His face is full. He's got chocolate chip cookies all over the place. And I look at my daughter and I said, oh, I see what's going on here. And she says, well, he didn't take the cookies. He just found them in his mouth. I thought, goodness. And I think that's, it's an interesting correlation. Chocolate chip cookies are definitely a munchy treat. I think that goes in line with our conversation today. But Izzy, tell us how your weekend was.
Yeah, I mean, it's summertime in Texas, so it's very hot. We're taking full use of the community pool. It's been a while for it to kind of get going, and it's hard for me to separate work from my personal life. So definitely go to the community pool, see people consuming quite a bit of adult beverages, and just hoping my neighbors get home without becoming customers. That's kind of the thing that I'm looking out for. But definitely looking at the opportunity to have a great summer, cool off in the pool, and try to let my mind be on the pool and not at work.
Yes, no, I get it. I understand. Well, today, joining us, very excited. It is an absolute honor. We have a fellow coworker of ours and someone who has been paramount personally for me and teaching me most of what I know here at Smart Start. Steve Luce, former Washington State Trooper. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thank you.
So tell us about your weekend. How was your weekend?
I live in a retirement community, so there's not a lot going on there. We drove our golf carts. It was nice outside. It was.
That's what you want us to think.
Yeah.
You want us to think that
there's a lot going on in there. I'll tell you that much. Yeah. Maybe not for this.
Well, I'm hoping today, we're so glad that you're here. We would like for you to help clear up the conversation around cannabis, specifically cannabis use and driving. And I want to explore more how the law really views DUI and DWAI, which is impaired driving, and marijuana-related DUIs. So especially for me, I'm interested and have questions around this topic in states that have legal weed.
Great. Just as a reminder, this podcast, Stigma-Free IIDs, brought to you by Smart Start. So over 30 years in business. Our support model is our program advisors are here to demystify all things IID. So answering questions about pricing, state-specific information, really guiding you along the process with empathy. So is people helping people. But let's be real, people get DUIs. It impacts people from all backgrounds, socioeconomic, age, professional status. We're here to help you break the stigma.
Oh, thank you, Izzy, so much for that. So, Steve, I want to go ahead and I just want to jump in. Let's get started on this. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
I started when I was in the State Patrol at 22 years old. I retired when I was at a little past 47. So I did 25 plus years as a trooper in the Washington State Patrol. Wow. Really enjoyed my time there. My focus was mostly DUI squads, multiple DUI squads. I was lucky enough to have a vast realm of everything from executive protection to boating enforcement to, and one of my favorite things is being on the riot squad. There's nothing like being in the middle of a riot with the adrenaline and all the things goes along there. So I did that for 10 years. So
DUI squad and riot squad. Yeah, for some reason I'm in panic mode. I'm not sure why, but what is a DUI squad and what is a riot squad?
DUI squad is a special team of troopers, because I was with the patrol. Their specific duty is to look for impaired drivers. And so instead of going out at night and answering calls and going within your beat, your duty is to go out and specifically look for impaired drivers. And it's usually a team. It could be a squad between 3 guys to 8 individuals, and they target an area and they go specifically look for impaired drivers, not handling other calls. Their primary duty is to stop impaired drivers.
So how did we get from you being this incredibly
Terminator, DUI squad, riot squad, towering at 6'7", Washington State Trooper to a Smart Start Vice President of Field Sales?
So I worked in the impaired driving section for about the last 10 years of my career. And part of that is working with the expert witness as far as the court. Everything is all around impaired driving. And so one day an individual, my lieutenant, came in, he put a box on my desk, and I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Hey, that's your new program that you're going to run." I said, "Okay, great." Opened it up, and it was the Interlock program for the state of Washington, which was contained in one box. And so at that time, I'd never seen an Interlock. I didn't know what it was. So I started doing some investigation, and we created the program in Washington State for the Interlock program. We passed 11 pieces of legislation pertaining to interlocks, and we rewrote the rules pertaining to that legislation, rewrote those 3 different times. And from that, went on the national circuit of speaking at different conferences around the country. And somebody from Smart Start called me up and said, "Hey, we see you can retire soon." I said, "Yes, I can. I like being a trooper." And then they said, "Hey, why don't you come work for us?" And I said, "No, I want to do this." And then eventually I caved in and kind of decided it was the best option for me and my family. So.
Okay, very interesting. Well, thank you so much for sharing your background. I certainly know how critical your role is at Smart Start, but I know Izzy and I have a lot of questions today about cannabis specifically. And DUI laws. So, Izzy, do you want to go ahead and kick us off here?
Yeah, I mean, specific to the topic in IIDs, can you tell us a little bit about an IID device and how it detects or does not detect marijuana?
So Ignition Interlock devices, I actually brought one here for you just so you can kind of see what it looks like. So I'll hold it up for the camera here. They're not real big. This is kind of what it looks like. And all the devices from any manufacturer, they are regulated by NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Association. So they set the federal standards on how they work. They are designed to detect alcohol only. They do not detect cannabis or THC or anything related to legal weed. So it is alcohol specific. So if you're blowing into the device, it's only looking for alcohol. It doesn't really know where it's coming from, if it's coming from your breath or a different source, but that's what it's there. The cell is in there just waiting for alcohol. And that's the only thing it can detect.
Interesting. So if I'm hearing this correctly, the device does not detect marijuana.
It does not detect marijuana in any way.
Okay, so what about in states like Colorado, for example, where there is legalized marijuana, legal weed, and something called a poly blow? Am I getting that right? Talk to me about a poly blow.
So in my terms, we call it a poly drug use. And what that is a lot of your drivers out there, they have alcohol in their system, but they've also had a fun night and they maybe have a little bit of THC in their system also. So they have both on board, we would call it. So they have alcohol on board and they have a drug or cannabis on board at the same time. So it's called polydrug use. And on a national standard, most people that we arrest for DUI or impaired driving that for cannabis have alcohol also in their system.
Wow.
And so that's why a lot of laws have IIDs required, because it's a high range. It's in the 70 to 80 percentile that have alcohol on board. So if we can put an IID in their car, we can prevent them hopefully from driving because they're using both products.
I see. Okay. So Izzy, I'm interested in if there's overlap here. So Steve, what you're describing is poly use.
Correct.
If I'm drinking, I'm also generally smoking marijuana if I'm someone who smokes marijuana. And in that case, I'm getting pulled over and I'm getting a DWAI or a DUI. So Izzy, you have an incredible background in sales. You have led many sales teams, and the sales culture is extremely celebratory. Have you seen this or experienced this? I mean, in any state, albeit it's legal or not?
No, it's pretty common. I think whenever there's a festive or celebratory atmosphere, especially in sales, like you have a big quarter, you close a big deal, people generally start with alcohol. And then that quickly transitions to use of other substances, THC. I've seen things beyond that. I think that's pretty common within the sales culture. I do feel things are changing a little bit, but definitely as I was coming up in sales the last 20 years, it's definitely been polyuse of substances. So it starts with alcohol and then just goes down the road towards other substances.
Wow, this is fascinating to me. So I think where my head is going in terms of technology, our technology at Smart Start, it's something I'm extremely proud of. We have a tech stack with a device that works. So if I'm a mom with kids in the car, and the likelihood of me getting locked out with a device that doesn't work is very low. Talk to me about, Steve, where you think technology is going in terms of detecting marijuana. Obviously, it sounds like those devices don't exist in market today because the fuel cell is designed to detect alcohol, not marijuana. So where's that technology going, and what have you heard or seen?
So there's a couple things along with that. If you're smoking marijuana, let's say you smoked it 2 weeks ago, you're still going to have what's called carboxy THC. What that is it's not impairing you, but it's still in your system. That's why if your employer does a drug test, they can see, oh, you smoked marijuana, but it was a while back. So,
sure.
So the carboxy, we can tell that. So there's a lot of devices out there that can give us a result on that. So in today's technology, the only thing we can really get the actual, let's say Washington State, because that's where I'm from, it's 5 nanograms of THC in your system, active THC. And so the only thing that really detects that today is blood. Is taking a blood test and drawing your blood from that. Outside of that, there is some saliva testing that's out there that's done. It's a little difficult to put into, like an interlock in your car, but there is some mouth swabs that you can do. And along with that comes time. They're not instant. Like when you take a breath test in your car, we get the results pretty much right away. With this kind of testing, it's a delayed response and a delayed result with that technology. So we're not able to really test for marijuana or active THC. That's the key right there. Is it active? Is it impairing them at the time they're driving? We cannot tell that. There's nothing out there today that tells us with the instant technology. So it relates back to a blood draw.
Understood. And Izzy, I know you had some questions too around just the differences. I know you've educated your staff on like what a DUI is and what a DWAI is, which is actually impaired driving. Any questions you have for Steve around that?
Yeah, I guess from a legal perspective, Stephen, you can speak specifically to the states that you're familiar with, or Washington State if you prefer, but is even where marijuana is legalized or weed legalized, is it still a felony in most states to drive while impaired or drive while intoxicated with the presence of marijuana?
So the most states, it's under the DUI statute. When I say statute, if you look up, and I'll use Washington because I know it very well, it says impaired driving. So impaired by drugs, it does say cannabis and alcohol. They're all the same. It doesn't differentiate between whether you had drugs or alcohol. They're combined. So most states actually just call it DUI. There are a few states that call it, add on to it, like Colorado and Oregon. They have a separate actual prong of their law that actually defines having it. Drugs on board, but most states combine them to the same, and so it's not a felony. It's mostly a gross misdemeanor.
I understand. You did say something earlier around 5 nanograms of marijuana. So for Morgan, if Morgan is out there, what does 5 nanograms represent? Are you saying over the course of, was that the 14 days, or is that represent 1 to 2 hits for me? And at what point am I considered impaired and not impaired? And how do we as a society judge that? And who is establishing the standard there?
Lots of questions there.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to channel the viewers.
So let's go back to, if you know what a legal limit on alcohol is 0.08. And that's in all states right now except for Utah, which is 0.05. So that's a limit we know. So they've said at 0.08 breath alcohol content, you're impaired. So on marijuana, it's still, it's still out for discussion right now what level that is, THC level. So when they test the blood and it comes back and it says there's 5 nanograms of THC in the blood. And so that's, comparatively speaking, that's the thought of 5 nanograms would make you impaired. But there's another prong to that, which is what the officers observed. The physical sobriety test, the roadside test, they're a common term where you see them on the roadside doing the test. All those things come into a factor also. So there's always 2 prongs to a DUI law. There is the actual physical 0.08, 5 nanograms. And then on the other side, there is what did the officer observed. Was this the eyes, the driving, the physical movements, their slurred speech, the SFSTs, the everything along that. That's what they really base that we have a program called DRE, which is Drug Recognition Experts. And so almost every police department has them. So if I were to stop someone and they were, impaired, and I knew they had maybe a little bit of alcohol, but man, I could tell they're pretty high. There's something up here.
Interesting statement. I could tell they're pretty high. How do you tell if someone's pretty high, Steve?
Well, you pull them over and, hey, dude, what's up? It's like,
I feel like you would do that though. Like, tell me some stories about this.
Well, speaking along that line, I was driving. It was a summer night in my patrol car, and I'm minding my own business. I'm going down a 4-lane highway, and I got my window down because I'm listening for stuff going on. And I had this strong smell of marijuana. I was like, where is that coming from? And I'm looking around, and I pull up to a stop sign, a signal, and I look to my right, and there's a older model station wagon. And that tells you how old I am, right? And so the window's down. There's this, it looks like, for those of you who don't, Cheech and Chong car.
Okay. So you can't see inside.
You can't see inside the windows. There's smoke filled, and it's literally coming out the window. Wow. And I'm sitting right next to him in a fully marked patrol car. They don't have no clue that I'm sitting there. So I'm just watching him, and I watch him, he's smoking as he's sitting at
he can't see you, and you can't see them.
Yeah. So long story short, I pull him over. And he was mesmerized by why I stopped him. And I said, well, have you been smoking? Have you been smoking any marijuana tonight? Or he's like, oh, no, officer, we would never do that. And so at the same time, I asked him what the joint was, what was in the ashtray. And he didn't have a response for that. So long story short, I think there's a lesson learned here for two things, right? So everybody in the car was high, because when you're smoking marijuana, everybody there's inside a car, or you can call it hotboxing if they know what that. I'm sure everybody on this podcast doesn't know what that is. So
different version of baking.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
not Morgan's version.
Yes, not Morgan's version, but it does happen. They were doing mobile hotboxing, and so long story short, I arrested the driver for. He did not have alcohol in his system, but he was definitely high and impaired on cannabis, and a possession of marijuana, and it was actually a very easy and fun traffic stop, I guess you'd say. I mean, you call something fun, but it was for those out there, don't hotbox and drive at the same time. No mobile hotboxing. That's not a good thing. No.
Yes, I hear that. I understand. I think too, what's interesting to me is this. I mean, this conversation has clearly become, very seriously lighthearted, which I think is important for us as a society to, again, not stigmatize those who are in this position, especially those who live in states where marijuana is legalized. Can you give us maybe some hints or cues legislation-wise where we are in terms of the field and testing for this? Do we see that other states are moving towards a 0.05%? You mentioned 0.05% being, I think, in Colorado. That's the BAC level if you are poly using. What's the nation doing? Is it looking at Colorado? Are we going to see that moving forward for other states?
Reference alcohol, 0.05, it's been in most DUI legislation from over a very long period of time. And when I say that, what that means is anything between 0.08 and 0.05, we can charge them for DUI on that standard, meaning just on those results. Then you can add in what the officer's observations are. So that's one prong of the DUI legislation. On the other prong, we can charge somebody for impaired driving without a blood test, without a breath test, without any of that, just on the officer's observation.
Observation alone. Okay.
Just alone and his expertise and his level of expertise. Unfortunately, in the state that I was in, a lot of times things got dismissed by the court. And sometimes those were long term. So we actually made hundreds and hundreds of DUI arrests into the thousands without any breath alcohol content or blood tests. It was all on what the officer observed.
Wow. And so for me, and being someone who is interested just in the topic itself, understanding the differences between 0.05 and a 0.08, I think is important. But if I am pulled over for an officer who has observed me for being high or under the influence and impaired, am I required to get an IID if I am convicted in every state, or is it different for certain states, especially if I'm maybe like a first-time offender? What if there's no other aggravating factors, or is it different state over state?
So each state's differently. I would say the majority, leaning toward the majority of the states today, if you're convicted on solely a drug, impaired driving, you're probably going to have an interlock in your car. because of what we talked about earlier, that most polydrug use, that most people have alcohol on board. So if you look at the states, they're trying to prevent people from drinking and driving and being impaired driving. And so most likelihood, you probably have to have an interlock. And depending on what state you're in, it could be after you're done with your court or your trial and your conviction. Or it could be right away if it's what we call administrative state, where you're getting it because you want to maintain your driver's license. So you could be getting it within the first 30 days after your arrest if you have what we call a day-for-day credit. So you can get it right away and get that term, the amount of time you have to have it in your car, over with, sometimes even before your actual DUI trial is done.
Yeah, I love that. When people are trying to show good behavior, they've gotten an exceptional recommendation from their attorney as a support system for them to install the IID, especially in circumstances where it may not be permanent or necessary at first before you've seen a judge. I think that judges have a tendency to look back and see that as good behavior. And so I am curious too, around our program advisor team. We've spoken a lot in the past around Smart Start and our program advisor team, Izzy, which you lead, and how if I am someone who has found myself in a situation where I have an officer who has observed me, or I do have a DWAI or a DUI, and it is a poly situation where marijuana is involved, and I don't know what the laws of my state are, what can I do if I'm in that situation?
Yeah, it's different for every state. Our program advisors are trained to research and do know at hand how each state is different. So I think the opportunity to consult someone that has talked to hundreds of people, have them start the program, really understand it, is a great opportunity to really help you navigate that. Because it is different in every state. Each state has different monitoring authorities. It may not necessarily be the DMV or a judge in each state. It's dependent on the state's requirements. So the opportunity to actually talk to a program advisor and help you walk through that. We also get people just calling that are ready to install before they even get the mandate from their monitoring authority, just to show that good behavior that Steve's talking about. So I think it's a really good opportunity to engage with our team and get those questions answered.
Yeah, and I think it's in a judgment-free zone as well. I can call in and I can have just a basic free advice, conversation, consultation with your team.
Say as little or as much as you want. I mean, we have people that tell us their entire story, and we have people that just want the details, right? So I think that's an opportunity. As I said, we're not rushing through the process. It is up to you how much you want to share.
Yeah, I understand. So, Steve, what else can you debunk for us today and demystify in terms of cannabis, marijuana, the IID space, and DUIs?
A couple things. When I talked a little about blood testing, and yes. So there are some states actually out there, Arizona being one of them, where all the officers are trained phlebotomists. And so you do not take a breath test in Arizona. You actually they would be drawing your blood. Wow. And so they will know if you're on cannabis or cocaine or whatever drug you're on, plus your alcohol at the same time. And there's also states where the troopers actually do it at the roadside. So they'll actually take your blood at the roadside. Wow. One of the big issues with blood is you have to send it to a toxicology lab, and the labs with cannabis coming on board get backed up on the results. And so they have to run into their systems, and it takes some time there. So there's some technology out there now where you can actually take the blood and actually test at the roadside or at a police station and get the results from the blood. So that's kind of on the cutting edge. It's not been implemented across the country, but they're developing that. So how would that work in our field? It would be, if you went to, you're arrested, you went to the police station, they would draw your blood, and then they would put it in, test it right there on scene and actually have the results while you're there, like a breath alcohol test. So wow. That would be changing it on the Interlock world. Not too much that we've seen there yet. Again, we can't prevent, because we want to know if it's active. We don't want to prevent somebody from driving that smoked marijuana 3 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And that's where really the technology is today. So there's nothing that tells us that it's actually impairing them right there and right now.
Okay. And I think too, lastly, one of the things I really wanted to touch on was this is a person-to-person scenario. Something like marijuana or even alcohol is going to impact different people of different sizes differently based on consumption, how much I've smoked or how much I've drank, my body makeup, how quickly my liver is going to process the alcohol in my system. All of those things are different. So is it safe to say, Steve, that the same is true for alcohol as it is for marijuana?
alcohol definitely is a little bit different, I think, than marijuana. So, okay. Honestly, I've never smoked marijuana, so I can't really give you that result. So on that side, but alcohol, it goes through your system and it, absorbed through your smallest intestine, goes through your bloodstream, and we're testing it that way. So the impairment, I believe, is a little bit how it's introduced into your body, whether it's, vaping is different than smoking a joint or crack or what's in we could go down a long trail with that, how it's going to impair you. So. I think the one thing, that, as marijuana's use was legalized across the country, people didn't realize that, hey, it's just as illegal to go out and drink a 6-pack or 8-pack of, a 12-pack of beer and get in your car and drive as to smoke a joint and get in your car and drive. And that relevance, we saw that across the country in our fatality rate. And so a lot of people unknowingly just got in the car and drove that way. And just going back to the fact that if you're driving the car and somebody lights a joint in the back, you're going to eventually become impaired while you're driving, where someone that pops a beer in the back doesn't affect the driver. And so we saw that impact a lot of lives.
Well, thank you, Steve, so much. And thank you for sharing everything you have today. I'm personally interested in seeing how we as a nation navigate those thresholds of impairment in terms of marijuana, knowing that it is so different than alcohol consumption. So this is my favorite part of the show. We're going to transition to our Reddit question. We love our Reddit community. Exceptional commentary out of Reddit today. Izzy, take it away.
Yes, so we have one that's specific to our topic that I was able to get off the Reddit channel, and it's long, so I'm going to read it to you, and I'd really like to take the opportunity to use Steve to answer this question with all your experience. So the question is, I got a DWAI in Colorado after smoking weed and drinking recently. I didn't realize that my BAC, which was only 0.05, qualified me for a DWAI at all. I thought it needed to be 0.08, but I was wrong. I've obviously learned the hard way that you could have to blow over 0.5 to get a DWAI. I felt caught off guard by this, but I'm accountable for my actions. I think people need to know more about this, and knowing that it would be less likely to drive. So, Steve, my question to you on this is, do you think we're doing enough to let people know about poly use and the fact that the level is lower if you're using multiple substances?
I think the education is always key, and there's lots of highway traffic safety departments that are pushing that across the country. But as far as the listeners, I think the key thing is if you're going to smoke marijuana and you're going to drink alcohol, he specifically pointed out that 0.05 result. In most states across the country, 0.05 is, you can be charged, like I said earlier, you can be charged with DUI at that level. The 0.08 level is that we don't have to have anything but the 0.08. At the 0.05 level, if we feel you're impaired, we can charge you with that. So, and then you put the marijuana on top of it, you're building a very strong case against yourself. And so I think when you get in a car, think about what you've just done, right? I mean, there's so many options today to keep other people safe. There's ride share and calling a friend and all those things. So education-wise, all the laws are, if you can go online, you can find those things, the laws, you can educate yourself there. There's lots of portals to get that information. Even on our website, you have information about that journey and how to protect yourself as you go on life.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for joining our episode today and having the cannabis conversation with Steve. Visit smartstartinc.com, and you can also get your first 2 payments free on any Ignition Interlock device with coupon code STIGMAFREE.
Or call us at 844-766-0156 for your free consultation.
Thank you again for joining us. I'm Morgan Ryan.
And I'm Izzy Varela.
Until next time, stay safe, drive smart.